Hi, it's another week, another recipe, and today we are making a cozy sweet roll from the 1940s called glory buns with a lovely sugar glaze. Come join me. Hey everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. My name's Courtney Morris and I cook history's forgotten recipes out of random cookbooks I find and sometimes websites. Thank you for joining me today. I hope we have a good recipe going today, and if you're new here, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, join the community. It is growing and it is awesome. And if you're coming back for more, of course, my utmost thanks for your support. I hope you enjoyed this video as well. Let's go. All right, so today's recipe is coming to you from the 1940's experiment.com, and we are making glory buns. I have no background on this aside from what's on her website, and she said she had made it during Remembrance Day, whenever she had posted this. Two reasons I picked this recipe was, one, the past couple videos I've done have been savory kind of meal kind of recipes, and I needed something sweet. And this is kind of like it seems like a sweet bun. And also the picture that she posted of this kind of looked like the Texas Roadhouse rolls with the cinnamon butter, and that made me really kind of want to go to Texas Roadhouse. So I don't think these are going to be exactly the same, but it was kind of that thought process that got me started. All right, first things first, 12 ounces weight of whole wheat flour or white. And I am a slave to white flour because it is the best. It's terrible for you, but it is so good. Okay, so it says place all dry ingredients in a bowl apart from raisins. And here we are again with fruit in bread. If you have watched any of my other recipes that involved fruit in bread, you know I've complained over the year of like, why is this a thing? But now I'm starting to warm up to it. Okay, 2 ounces of sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon powder, and honestly, anytime a recipe calls for cinnamon or allspice or nutmeg, I always kind of stick a little bit more in there than I should because I really do like that pungent flavor. I really love it when the cinnamon or the spicy warm flavors come through. Now it does say to put the yeast in, like all your dry ingredients, but I am team proof your yeast first kind of a person, mainly because I like to make sure my yeast isn't dead, because I hate getting to the point where you get it in the oven to rise, or your warm spot or whatever to rise, and it doesn't. And I've had that happen before enough to where I proof my yeast first. Oh, and I guess on a quick note on the cinnamon, I'm using a half teaspoon. That's why you saw me put in 2 at a time. I didn't put in that much more cinnamon than it called for. It was just, I have a smaller spoon. Okay, so to proof yeast, if you don't know how, quick little tutorial. It says 8 ounces of warm water, like almost to the point where it burns your hand and you have to take it out from the stream of water. And then 3 teaspoons of dried yeast. And so remember, I'm using my half here, so there's 6. And it does not call to add sugar into your yeast because technically the yeast would use the sugar that's in the bowl to feed off of, but since I am proofing it, I will add a half teaspoon just for that yeast to develop a bit better. Give it a stir around. And make sure you get the stuff that's in the bottom crack because that will just sit and just linger. I have my oven heated up to 170 degrees. That's what I proof it at, and I just turn it off and let my bread dough just rise in a warm oven. But on at least American stoves, we have 4 burners, and one of the back burners on American stove is going to be the vent, which means heat from the oven is going to come out of it, so you got a rush of hot air. I like to put my yeast that I'm proofing on that vent because it proofs it faster. Our yeast is proofed, and you can tell by, if you use a clear glass container, you can tell there's a separation. It'll look like, you know, like when you have like a beer, you have clearness down here and foam at the top. It won't be clear, but it'll be a different color and foamy at the top. And you can also tell on the top, it is very foamy and bubbly. If it doesn't do that, it's not alive. Also, make sure you do it in a big enough container because this can grow so stinking fast and make a explosion of a mess all over your counter. Not that I know what that's like. That was over my stove. Anyways, so I've still got enough time where this can proof a little bit more. I can finish adding some of the ingredients in and be good to go. So next it says rub in margarine, and like usual, I forget, I don't use margarine, so I forget to even think about it at the store. So We're using a butter ration, whatever. And I need 2 ounces of butter. Now it says to rub in the margarine or butter, which means not melted, but more like, I think if you're making like biscuits, kind of make it crumbly or like a pie crust, you just kind of rub it in nicely. And then we're just gonna mush it around with our hands. If you have a pastry cutter, that would work too. And we're just gonna incorporate it the best we can until it is just sandy, really. Okay, so as you can see, it is now just as fine and crumbly as it was before. It's incorporated in, there's no huge chunks of butter, huge chunks of butter. I'm gonna add in my raisins, which is, yeah, it's like 2 ounces of everything. 2 ounces of raisins. It does say sultanas, currants, or raisins, and it does say optional. And it's optional. Maybe I don't want to do it. You know what? Let's go for it. My kids can pick them out. But I mean, really, 2 ounces of raisins. That's it. That's nothing. So I did leave the yeast a little bit while we did that, and see how much bigger that has grown. If you use too small of a container, you are gonna be in for a disaster. So that is nice and puffy. All right, we're just going to pour this in. All right, we're gonna mix this in, and this is going to be something that we have to knead because it is a yeast bread. I'm just going to mix this around until I can get it on my cutting board or my counter, whatever you're using. It smells like Christmas, though. I mean, it really does. That's picked up most of the flour. Oh, it smells heavenly. So I hope these are light and fluffy, which was one of the reasons I wanted to use white flour. And if it was me, I would put potato flour in it because it just makes it so much softer and fluffier, but the recipe did not call for that. So that's okay. We'll make these, and then if I really like them, we'll make adjustments. It does call for kneading this dough, and look at Stacy, it's not moving. My cutting board is not moving. It is so awesome. To over knead things is gonna make it tough. To under knead things will make it not really rise and be as fluffy as you want it. So with yeast bread dough, you want to at least do the poke test to where if after you knead it, you poke it and the dough comes back to you. It just kind of springs back and doesn't leave an indentation. Right now, I haven't done anything to it, and if you poke in, it leaves a big hole, an indentation, a big fingerprint. We don't want that. We want it to spring back. So for the amount of dough that we have right now, I would say, hand kneading about maybe 7 to 10 minutes. But really, you're going to be looking for that elasticity that you're going to be building with that gluten. Okay, so this has been kneaded probably about, I think I did about 7, 8 minutes. And now I can do the poke test again, and you'll see the dough will bounce back. So see how that, you can poke in and it bounces back. I don't know if you can see that bounce back. Okay, so the other thing that you can do too to test is I've always heard it called the gluten window. I don't know if there's a technical term for it, but you take a hunk of dough, and preferably without a raisin, and if you have kneaded it well enough and the gluten has been activated well enough, you should be able to start to try to pull it apart up at a light, and it won't tear, but you'll be able to get light through it and not tear. So this is a single rise recipe. There's only one rise, which I love because it's fast. And it does say to place on a greased, deep-sided tray, like an 8x8, like this. But I just pulled this out and it is rusted to all get out. I don't know, it just finally died. So we're just not gonna use that. We're gonna go get another one. And my only other dish that I can use for these rolls is gonna be my 9x13, and it's only gonna fill up halfway, but it's okay. That part doesn't matter. I'm gonna need more butter, hold on. So I'm just gonna grease half of this, and if I need to grease any more, I will. There's half, and that's roughly, I mean, if you think about it, that's the 8x8 right there. You're just gonna have some on the edge that are gonna have rounded edges because that's on the end pieces. So it says if you're gonna use something like this, you just do 4 across, 4 down. So that's what I'm gonna do. It's the same size, roughly. And so what you want to do is you don't just roll this into balls like cookies. Anytime you want to do rolls that are soft and fluffy and have that top and bottom to them, you have to fold them under each other like a little balloon. So take a little bit of dough and you put it in both hands and you fold it almost under itself. Like see how I'm making a pocket underneath? And just roll it over like you have a little balloon. you won't have any air bubbles in there, and you just pinch it off and you have a lovely little roll. Now you kind of have to gauge how big you need these for how many pieces you have. So you can always pinch off more, but don't just pull it off. Just pinch it off from the bottom. That bottom is going to be considered your bread seam, and that goes down. All right, they are nicely tucked in there, and now we need to cover it and let it raise. And I prefer plastic wrap because it seals off completely, keeps moisture in, whereas towels don't. And just in case you have monster rising, which does happen sometimes if you forget about them, they won't stick to your towels, and it's so hard to get bread dough out of towels. So if it sticks to plastic wrap, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, so while I'm waiting for those to cook, I had a quick thought before we get into the glaze, and yes, there's a glaze to these, which icing on my roll. I love it. Anyways, I had a thought that in the original recipe it said to proof for an hour, but because I am using an already heated space, you might want, if you do that method, you might want to cut it down to 20 minutes to 30 minutes and check it. Otherwise, it's going to overproof. Sometimes that does happen on those recipes that have a longer rise time but are expecting you to not have a really warm place to proof. So just keep that in mind if you do this. And it goes for any other bread, because if you overproof it, it'll get big, like huge big, but the second you move it out of that warm space into the oven, if it hits any cool air, it will deflate and look awful. Okay, so there's gonna be a sugar glaze that goes on this, but it's not going to be like a glazed donut, like not a powdered sugar or icing sugar kind of. I'm making a small Courtney adjustment to this because of A, experience, and B, I can't do water and sugar over top of rolls. I know that was more of a, I don't have any butter or margarine to spare kind of a thing. I have to. I can't have these without a butter on top of it. I'm going to melt this. The first time in any of these recipes that I've done that actually I can melt my butter on purpose. And then 3 tablespoons of sugar. Okay, so see, okay, so the sugar is dissolving. That is nice and gooey. It'll make a lovely glaze. Okay. I got these out of the oven and they're cool enough to not blow steam in my face so you can't see me, because that's really fun. So I am going to brush the top of these with my sugar butter. Now, this recipe is baffling me a little bit, and I'm wondering if part of it is because I have a propane stove instead of an electric one, which I think can be a little cooler of a heat, if you will, or a more wet heat. I'm not entirely sure how that all works, but the recipe said to put it in at 350 degrees or 180 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. I had to put these in for almost 25 to 30 minutes, and they're still kind of anemic, but they're done. But there's no golden brown on top. They just look a little anemic, but I feel like everything in the 40s was probably a little anemic, even the bread. But it smells pretty good. I'm a little worried though, because there's not a lot of cinnamon in there. I'm wondering how pungent it's gonna be, or if it's just gonna taste anemic. Okay, well, let's give it a shot. They're not the most uniform. And I think probably that's because I did use a larger pan, which might let them spread out a little more rather than using, like an 8x8 where you could, mush them all together and keep them in a similar shape. So keep that in mind if you do make these. All right. Well, it's anemic. It's not, okay, let me start over. There's not any spice flavor to it. There's a spice smell to it, but it does not translate in the taste. At least not by my standards. I taste the raisin, and I taste a very fluffy roll. I mean, the texture is dinner roll meets butter and sugar, which is what I kind of wanted out of this, because it is giving me Texas Roadhouse vibes. I'm not so sure what's so glorious about these glory rolls, or glory buns, or whatever they are. I'm a little disappointed in the lack of fall flavor here. But that's okay. Because I have a whole bowl of sugar butter that I can just, spread on all the pieces. Overall, Easy recipe. The dough is super easy to make, very pliable, very workable, very nice and fluffy. Good, it's really good texture. Could benefit from some potato flour and a lot more spice. But honestly, it's a good base recipe. It's a very good base. For a 1940s wartime ration, something out of nothing with whatever you had ingredients, this would pass. No problem. You have stuck around to the end. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you hanging out with me in my kitchen to enjoy some of these old historical experiments and see how they turn out. If you haven't already, please consider joining the community. Hit the subscribe button and join us. We are growing, and I would love to hear from you. Hit the little bell notification that will let you know that I upload a new historical experiment recipe every Monday. And if you liked the video, hit the thumbs up. It does something for the algorithm to help the channel grow and be shown to a lot more people, and it also tells me that I am making content that you're enjoying. Oh, and also, I did find out that after you hit 500 subscribers, the community pages start up, so I'm going to be able to give you guys some extra stuff, going to be able to do some polls and start asking questions and get to know you guys as my tribe a little bit better. And once again, my utmost thanks for coming over to my side of the internet. If you need something else to watch after this, check this video out. It was pretty dang good. And you can always check out any of my other recipes. Some of the fails are actually pretty good too, more in the sense that you get to laugh at me gagging or trying to throw up. So, all right, I will see you next Monday. Have a great week. I'll see you soon. Bye.